Love those piggies, yes.
I love the barn. Thank you for doing this,
You're welcome. Thanks
and
for
for
inviting me.
inspiring us and leading us and informing us and keeping them honest.
Freedom of Information Act is something you may need to fill in information, find out things about what the government is up to. The Freedom of Information Act, Federal Freedom of Information Act, passed in 1966. You know, the basic function of Freedom of Information Act is to ensure informed citizens vital to the functioning of democratic society. Federal government provides for fee waivers for media and any entity that can show that it can disseminate the information to the public and it's in the public interest. Now, if you're looking for things for commercial interest, you've got to pay. You're not going to, you can't rely upon the government to profit from your information request. South Carolina has the same rule, that they do have a clause for allowing a waiver of the fees, but it's seldom done. So, but if you read the South Carolina Code of Laws, it's really says it all. It says it all. The General Assembly finds it is vital in a democratic society that public business be performed in an open and public manner, so that citizens shall be advised of the performance of public officials and of the decisions that are reached in public activity and the formulation of public policy. Toward this end, provisions of this chapter must be construed so as to make it possible for citizens or their representatives to learn and report fully the activities of their public officials at a minimum cost or delay to the person seeking access to public documents or meetings. I don't think you could ever improve on that. Whoever wrote that, it's just perfect. It just sums it all up. You can always just go back to that paragraph and say, this is what it's all about. And you've got to give lawmakers credit when it's due, when they write a law that's easily read and understandable. I'm just going to talk about South Carolina Freedom of Information. It gives you the right to inspect or copy public records. There are fees. They are required to put a fee schedule. There's a big debate over that right now. And beginning of this month, the city of Aiken tripled their fees for some Freedom of Information Act request. Probably hoping that nobody's going to bring them to court, where if you had a good lawyer, they would lose. I'm convinced of that. There are matters exempt from disclosure. That is important to know because that really ties into what's going on with Project Pascalis and a lot of things around here. There's trade secrets, personal information, employment information, and confidential information. But the ones that you hear the most are documents of and documents incidental to proposed contractual arrangements, documents incidental to proposed sales or purchases of properties. Now, you got to start watching for the language there. Incidental can cover a lot of ground. They can say that invoice is incidental to the property sale, whereas really it's not. But you get your only alternative to fighting it is to possibly go to court, because there's really no arbitration or appeals process within South Carolina's agencies and public bodies like there is in the federal government. The federal government, every major agency has a FOIA, at least Department of Energy does, has a very strong FOIA appeals division that you can go to and you can get things overruled. The other part is that the memoranda, correspondence, documents, and working papers relative to efforts or activities of a public body or person or entity employed by or authorized to act for on behalf of a public body to attract business or industry. This is probably the #1 clause that is cited for exempting information, and as you see, exempting people from accessing meetings, going into executive session under a similar clause. It's a pretty wide range, but both of those items is one of the reasons there's a lot of information about Project Pascalis that is still not in the public domain. And I want to stress that FOIA, South Carolina Freedom of Information Act, says may, much more than, the word must is almost absent when it comes to exempting information. They may release everything. And they just have to let the private entity know they're going to release it. It doesn't say they must withhold it. it says they may disclose it. And that's really important. And right now, the city of Aiken is choosing to not disclose. So you're making a request. I'm going to skip that part for a second. I'm going to go to open meetings now. The other part of South Carolina law is open meetings. And this is really important because anybody who's following this Project Jackson in North Augusta knows that they were sued and the city of North Augusta lost over a relatively minor Freedom of Information Act open meeting violation. They just didn't specify what they're going to executive session for. Compared to that, this is some pretty serious FOIA violations going on with this project. They routinely go into executive session, mix up the reasons why. There's a lot of times they don't need to be in executive session. They've met in executive session over 50% of the time, and probably related to Project Pascal is more like 80 to 90% of the time at AMDC meetings. There's been almost no open meetings regarding this project at the AMDC's open meetings, and even less at City Council because City Council has not even been briefed as a body by the developers or the AMDC. Ed Wolf said that on May 9th. He flat out said that we have not been briefed yet. So open meetings are open except for when there's matters of employment, that's understandable, security, investigative proceedings, but once again, they can go into executive session for discussions and negotiations regarding contractual arrangements, proposed sale or purchase of property. Now, if you have a purchase and sale agreement that was signed in December, and it's due up here in, I'm going to read exactly what it says. Just give me a second. December 3rd of last year, the AMDC wrote that the purchase and sale agreement has a deadline of this summer. They have to come to a master development agreement by the end of this summer. What's the end of this summer? Anybody know what that date is? Is it September 21st, the formal end of summer, the calendar date? Or is it Labor Day when most people consider summer over? Is it the beginning of school when most kids think summer is over? Is that a legally viable definition for the deadline to consummate a purchase and sale agreement? But that is what they wrote back then. They did not provide the exact date. So it's really important because if that's still true and they have not amended that purchase and sale agreement, they're about out of time on that one. The other part is discussion. So they can go into executive session for that, behind closed doors. Discussion of matters related to proposed location, expansion, or provision of services. And this is important, encouraging location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the area served by the public body. So if you're not encouraging it, then you shouldn't be going to executive session, right? Under that term, am I correct? Well, just a few months ago, Aiken City Council went into executive session to discuss a planning issue relating to somebody's proposal to establish a business on Florence Street. And they voted it down 7-0. There's a picture of the lady in the papers, she's crying. They invested all this money. They went into executive session citing that and saying they needed to take legal advice. It's a very, very strange thing that they did. There's no, and once again, they do not have to go into executive session. You can stay out in the open and talk about it. There's nothing that says you must go into executive session. You should probably go into executive session for privacy issues, employment, discussing somebody's salary. In executive session, there can be no decisions made. There has to be a vote after they come out. And then to finish off South Carolina FOIA, there's requirements for notification, there's requirements for keeping minutes. And I provided a bunch of links here that maybe we can put this up somewhere. Just going back to that part about making a request, if you're going to start making a request, it really is good to have a group behind you. If you're doing it solo, you're just they just find it solo. I was very fortunate when I worked in Texas, to have a very organized group behind me, and when I moved here in South Carolina, I could say, our group reaches this many people, we disseminate information, but as an individual, I can only say, I just want this information, I'm hoping to be able to disseminate it. So it's very good, you organizing as a group, because that gives you, you have a group behind you when you make a request, and they take it a little bit more seriously. They have to take every request seriously, but you know how it is. You know, you can request single documents, series of documents, and then there's what's called fishing trips. And bureaucrats like to say you're on a fishing trip. And the way I like to put it is, well, maybe I am on a fishing trip, but I'm just fishing that hole on the river. I'm not sweeping the whole thing with a net. I want what's in that hole. I want a target on that. I know there's some fish in that hole, and I want those fish. So that's where I'm fishing. And so when they say you're on a fishing expedition, well, just say, well, maybe I am, but I know how to fish. Do you? You know how to fish. And requests are easy, but responses are trickier. When they respond, they can deny you information, they can cite exemption, they can charge excessive fees, like what is going on right now. And actually, it's been going on since the very beginning, and I have the City of Aiken on the record. They had to waive one fee. They charged me like $32. That doesn't sound like much, but yeah, it's $32. And I don't like to be somebody stealing 50 cents from me. I get upset about that. I'm one of those people who the store will say this is what the price says on your tag. It's, you know, you either change your tag or return it. Charging excessive fees, citing exemptions, and not providing information requested. I have this example. I've got 22 documents. I asked for just some correspondence. I got 22 documents. They said it took them 2 hours to find. 19 of the documents were identical. They were all letters to legislators. They were carbon copies with just a different heading. So there's really 3 documents. I said, how did it take you 2 hours to find 3 documents relating to the request for $20 million to legislators and public officials? And it took you 2 hours to find that? A $20 million request? And I said, really, this is embarrassing. And Stuart Bedenbaugh said, we'll waive that fee. But there's been other instances just like that. So if you're going to go to the city right now, it's pretty tough on FOIA unless you're totally out there in an area that doesn't involve development. The county is got a, and the disturbing part about that is the City of Aiken used to be very, very open. The City of Aiken was a model of openness, in my opinion. I don't know how many times I've cited their meeting minutes to the county and saying, why can't you guys keep minutes like that? Your minutes are terrible. They're like half a page. Why can't you do that? Why can't you film your meeting? So that's pretty much what I have to say, if that's, any of that makes sense.
Don, what is the recourse for them violating the state rules?
You have to go to court. I don't know of any other recourse. Bill Taylor, who worked on FOIA reform 2014 to 17, tried to establish an arbitration system, but it didn't go. We don't have that. They also, in that reform, took out all the teeth. There's much less of a fine now. The consequences of violating it are a lot lower than they were in 2013. Not a lot, but they're lower. They didn't make it tougher. Go ahead.
We go on the city's site, you go to the City of Aiken, and then you walked me through it when I did my first FOIA request. They have an actual form on the
They
site.
do,
the city
yes.
site.
They're very organized. It's a very organized system.
Can you tell us how we figured that out?
I put it down here, but
Oh, it's on.
if you're online, well, you can do it 2 ways. You can just walk in and hand them a piece of paper saying, under the Freedom of Information Act, I want this. You can scribble it on a matchbox.
To the Regions Bank building, the old Regions.
Yeah, that's right. Or you can go online and submit it through their form, which is a very systematic way of doing things. It's very organized, and they track it well, and they do respond within the required time limits. They're required to respond within 10 days that they received it.
So then I got an email that said I owed money.
And then you had the choice of saying you're overcharging me and explain why, or you can just pay it.
I think I PayPal, maybe. I was able to use
You just-
PayPal, or credit card, I guess.
Yeah, well, however they pay it, I just use a card. Or you can go in and just pay them cash. Like your credit card, huh?
I hope I can phrase this right. I need to rehearse it in my mind more. You have a special aptitude for this stuff. I've been oblivious to just about everything that's happened, everything that I wouldn't know where to begin to ask the right questions to even know what I want to request, to even know what's illegal or what's, questionable. And what I wish is that you had maybe like an apprentice or 2 or 3 or 4 to kind of, because I'm learning by reading your stuff and asking you questions, I'm learning, but I wouldn't know where to begin, and I've just been amazed at the stuff that you've turned up. And then when you've explained, because I'm like, well, okay, what, so, and you're like, oh, this, you explain why it's wrong, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my mind is blown. They're actually doing this, but I didn't know 5 minutes ago that it was, an unethical. I mean, you would, I don't know why it's so. Would it be possible to have sort of an apprentice?
Well, the Aiken Chronicles you write for, that is a wonderful, when you follow them, you get a lot of information.
Yeah, I'm learning.
So I know the journalist who offers classes on doing FOIA requests. So you can do like an intro to it of being like, she offers it to like organizations, freelance journalists, and that sort of thing. So if anyone has like interest in that, I can certainly.
Well, that would be a good resource, but municipal law.
Get it to me and I'll post
Yeah.
it. Okay. Get information.
But just knowing municipal law, I don't know,
Well, that's the thing, I just 3 months ago, I didn't know much about the city code, to tell you the truth. I haven't lived in the city in years, and I don't really care some days. But now, and that's the thing, if you want to know something, first you can ask. Ask the city manager, ask the city. The city has a portal, you can just ask questions. And just go to, or you can send them a letter. If they don't answer, you say, why didn't you answer? Why can't you answer this simple question? And then you can say, well, what am I looking for? And then you go to the municipal code, find what's required. For example, every department's required to have an annual report. Well, that annual report should be readily available, right? So ask, can I see your annual reports? And I couldn't find them for the AMDC, so I had to file for Information Act request. And I found out they really don't have an annual report, it's just a report within their budget. So, the municipal code actually says that the city manager is supposed to have a format, a generic format that every department is supposed to use to have their annual report. And they don't have one right now. I get that. So, and what's really important about that is that anytime you get a response, even if you don't like the response, you got to take a look back and say, how does this work for me? Because sometimes no response is more informative than what you can get.
Yeah.
And I know that, I'll tell you, if you really want to get your head wrapped around in a circle, watch the documentary on Donald Rumsfeld that Errol Morris did, where he gets confused himself about all the known unknowns and the known knowns and the unknown knowns, and you watch Rumsfeld just twisting his own brain around saying, I don't think I got that quite right. And he's laughing about it, and it's really funny, but it's also a little scary. Yes?
Yeah, Don, I wanted to kind of differentiate, especially with Project Pascalis, because, I at one time was on the town council, and so I understand you know, there was opportunities for the town council when I was on to want to, okay, here's a piece of property that'd be a great industrial site. We want to quietly go to this guy and see if we can get the property and not have people know about the negotiations. All of a sudden the property goes up and the public entity has to pay more money. So I get that, but on Pascalis, there's been 2 negotiations that's gone on, and I think they're hiding the cloak behind all of it. And that is one, the purchase by the development group that is bought, which is already done. So on the part where it says, you know, it's, you know, proposed sales and contracts, really mean things that are in action and not things that have already happened that you just want to kind of keep underneath, because they're tying it to then the future sale to this development firm where they're still negotiating. So what I find fascinating is they're having public hearings on here's what this group wants to do, yet they're hiding behind the cloak of executive session on how they talk about it before they talk it out in front. Because they're really talking about it out in front of everybody, but it's obvious they're talking about other things besides that. And so that whole thing beforehand, when they bought the hotel for $10 million, and all of those issues, which Preservation South Carolina tried to get out and elevate.
Well, you said a real good point, that whole purchase that happened a year, it wasn't a purchase a year ago, it was a bond issuance a year ago. Lisa looked into that bond issuance quite a bit. And it was a bond issuance a year ago. And the bond issuance was for property anywhere between Williamsburg Street and Morgan Street. You know, for $10 million, they were giving them permission to buy property within that whole Parkway district. And there was no indication in any of the notifications that said they're going to buy the hotel. However, what you're getting, I think, is what was known before that. Why didn't they know that? Why didn't they say this is what we want to do?
Yeah.
Because the mayor knew.
Yeah.
I can tell you that because he met with Weldon Wyatt in May of 2021 when Weldon Wyatt was backing out. As if you're not familiar, in March 2021, Weldon Wyatt had 2 companies that were going on. His investment company called WTC, which was buying property, and that was negotiated by lawyers working for the law firm of Smith Massey et al. And he had his company called GAC LLC, which has been around since 2004, which is a development. So he had the property purchase arm and the developer arm. The city had an agreement with the developer arm, GAC. And the funny thing is that at that time, WTC didn't exist as a South Carolina company. It dissolved in January 2021. So written about a little bit. And they didn't reincorporate until May 2021, 3 days before they signed. Somebody must have found out. I asked them this, I got no answers. When did you find out that WTC wasn't incorporated anymore? Because you've got this date here and you got this date here, and they don't match up. But, so WTC was one who made the offer. Then they backed out, and if somebody didn't buy that property then and there, or do what's called the assignment, the Chamber of Commerce took assignment on it, they were going to lose that purchase and sale agreement. It was going to be null and void. So the Chamber of Commerce took it, and then eventually they passed the bond issuance. So they knew what they were going to buy. The MDC knew what that $10 million was for, but they didn't say why at that August meeting. 2 meetings. So go ahead. I've got some questions for you right here.
Oh, 2 questions. The tombstone, was there ever a tombstone printed on the issuance of the bonds? I mean, have they been sold? Who underwrote the bonds?
I don't know that answer.
But so are they available for purchase? I mean, we should know that.
Oh, actually, there's something. There was a meeting where they said that some people from Woodside were interested in investing. That's exactly what it said.
But a $9
But they said it was
million
already
issuance.
taken care of. They didn't need any investors. But
Isn't that kind of scary?
well, probably, yeah.
So who can we get to look at bond issuances?
Somebody who understands bonds.
Next.
How's that for an answer?
That'll be you.
Oh, I'm not good on that one yet. Okay, the other question I have, which I still don't understand, is why is Edenbaugh, as city manager, why has he not been part of the lawsuit? Also, you would think administratively, he should be captain of the city. I don't know anything about city council versus mayor, but Edenbaugh is a city manager. I looked at his bio.
City managers,
He was in charge of the Board of Elections, which we had run-ins with him years ago on that. He's not into public information. Not a person who believes in public input, especially the Board of Elections. So he comes from a little bit of background to exclude us on this referendum because he knows this. But as city manager and with just a public administration degree, why is he not responsible for being captain of all this, and why is he not part of the lawsuit? And should he?
I don't know.
But why are we?
However, the lawsuit has a clause for John Doe 1 through 10 and Jane Doe 1 through 10.
That's right.
So,
But they should be
at
accepted.
the time, there was not enough evidence to implicate him in.
I think that's what it was.
But what can
in
the
the
public
violations.
do as landowners to go to Edenbaugh and say, we expect this for you of the following?
And I'm not part of that lawsuit, but I can't speak to
Well,
what
I
you're
know, but I
saying.
mean, I'm talking about individuals. We
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
need
what
to
can you
see.
do? You can just send him a note. He's fairly responsive. He'll give you these quick
Me too.
answers.
Stewart's bosses are the city council.
That's what
Yeah,
I
And
said.
so it's a political position. So what you have to do is you have to put political pressure on city council on who they hire to run your town.
So how do we get rid of Pierce and how do we get rid of Clinton?
Here's the note.
Well, it takes
I
active
have a
input.
question.
say, because
I have a question. How do I read your stuff? Where do I read what you're writing and exposing? I don't know.
Oh, she'll give you stuff.
Oh, she'll get you.
You got a question?
We have a former city council
Ma'am,
member
you got
here.
a question?
No, I wanted to sort of answer,
But legally, he has to.
ask
You
Jane for
online,
her
do you
answer,
watch on the
since
computer?
she's a former city council person, but
They're about to
Stuart
start
runs
running
for the
out.
city council. He
That's why I'm
can't,
looking at it.
yeah, he can't,
I'm off base. You can look at it.
No.
he follows
Oh.
what they want, what they want him to do.
Can I put some clarity on something real quick?
Sure.
And when I was head of Preservation South Carolina, of which I retired recently, but 13 years ago, Weldon White called us and wanted to have a meeting about what he thought was the best way to deal with the development of Vaucluse, Warrenville, Graniteville Mill. We brought in one of the leading historic architects in the country, and we had a meeting and powwow up at his gated, long place.
Yeah,
We held court with Weldon up there. And it was a fascinating meeting because we sat there and we talked about the power of preservation and all the tax credits and everything that could be delivered to him if he were to take that route to try to develop these properties. This was 13 years ago. There is absolutely no reason those shouldn't be vibrant, restored buildings right now. And he absolutely refused to and ignored everything that we said and did. Now, so it wasn't any surprise to me that when we came in several years ago with the issue with the hospital, right? And they wanted to demolish the hospital, and guess who's behind the door on that one?
Yeah.
It's Weldon White. Guess who's behind the door on all of this? So, you know, a lot of this type of stuff that we found all over has to do with very powerful personalities that know how to manipulate very weak-minded people. And so when you have people in power and city councils that do not know how to process information very well and think they need to rely on experts, and yet the experts who know how to do it, they totally ignore. It never surprises me. I will say that I'm meeting with developers now that has finally gotten a hold of Vaucluse and Warrenville, and they're getting ready to restore them. They finally got hold of them. And they're getting ready to restore them as they are getting ready to restore the Kendall Mill in Edgefield to do. So part of my whole thing and what we're going to be talking about as now with Preservation Solutions is is just trying to get out there for everybody out there who's never really dealt with this sort of stuff before, is that the City Council of Aiken has specifically, intently ignored every expert that's come to them. Some of them have been my board members that met with them 3 years ago touring that hotel and told them exactly what they need to do to bring value to it, and they ignored it. There is some specific connectivity, financial and pressure connectivity with that corporation that is beyond we're able to see. And hopefully it'll disintegrate under the light of the lawsuit, but we'll see.
Yes.
Where could I get more information on what you just mentioned about Vaucluse, Warrenville, on that you said that's impending progress and developing, restoring those? Where can I get more information on that? Or is it not available yet?
It's just a developer, I mean, I'll tell you the name, I'm meeting with them next week, I'll be able to tell you more. It's
Okay.
just a developer that's bought it, he's gonna restore it like dozens of other mills around the state are restored.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that for
Some
Vaucluse.
questions. I'm just gonna go over it real quick. How much is Gary Smith being paid by the city? The last I saw was $150. He's paid for 30 hours a month, $150 an hour. It's pretty reasonable. And then after that, I think it goes up to his $400. But his existing contract, no one seems to be able to find just yet.
Interesting.
And that's a problem too, because I FOIA'd for a contract for somebody doing work on Pascalis, and he gave me something from 2017. And they're saying that still applies for somebody working on the new public safety building. So, and once again, that's an interesting thing. We get this thing, it says, I asked for the contract for working on Pascalis. It says the contract is for public safety building, but we're still using it. And then, okay, well, if that's what you say, then that's what I can say. It doesn't kind of ring well with a lot of people, is it? That they're relying on a 5-year-old contract for a whole different project, a whole different level. A project that everybody agreed with for this very controversial one. City council members, are they paid? Yes, and the mayor's paid. I think the city council currently makes $9,000 a year, and the mayor, it's about $17,000, but don't quote me on that. AMDC, do they receive funds? They are funded by the city writes them a check every once in a while, so they have money in the bank. And the city gave them $10 million in bond. From the bond issuance, they gave them a grant, so they could buy all that property. And I think that was pretty much it. It says something about Aiken Alley LLC on this. Aiken Alley LLC, to my knowledge, has nothing to do with this project. Aiken Alley Holdings is very intricately involved. Yeah, that's Massey, Toggle.
Does that include Mary Gwynn?
I don't know who's in that. I've asked them who the investors are. I've asked the AMDC who the investors are. I've asked Rick Massey who the investors are.
But the Massey building in the alley raised already one rent triple.
Yeah, that's a whole other issue in itself. Now you realize you can't get information on private entities is a whole lot harder than getting information on.
Yeah.
However, that private entity does communicate. If that private entity is communicating with the city, all their communications are available through the Freedom of Information Act. And for example, I did find out that Tim O'Brien was using his private email to communicate with Ray Massey. Which is not supposed to. I'm sure I've actually FOIA'd for the city manual, city handbook for employees, and said this should be free. You should actually post this where your employment ads are running, so that somebody who wants to work for the city can read and say, oh, these are the rules. Don't you want to know what the rules are in the place you're going to work beforehand, not after you get hired? I know I do, but we'll find out what the rules are. I don't think the rules allow you to be doing business out of your personal email. I know the company I just worked for, the last 2 companies I worked for, the last 3, did not. If you were doing personal business out of your business email, you could get terminated like that. Okay?
Yeah, so I have a question that may be a little too specific, but my understanding is that the Sherman Act protects businesses from undue interference through collusion, through things like monopolies. Do you know, it says under the Freedom of Information that encouraging, expanding an industry or other businesses in an area served by the public body is protected under an FOIA, but wouldn't that conflict with the Sherman Act? Do you know how the two relate?
You know,
Okay.
I haven't even thought about it.
Sorry.
Heck of a question.
And
That's good.
FOIA is
That's good.
national, right?
Huh?
FOIA is national, whereas
Well, they-
Sherman Act would be.
The Sherman Act is national.
Oh, that's
Sure,
Sherman,
sure.
sorry.
Well, every state has their own, every state has their own freedom of information laws.
Right.
And the federal government has their own law. Every agency is supposed to follow the federal, every federal agency has to follow federal FOIA. Every state agency has to follow state FOIA. And everything below state, cities, municipalities, counties, school boards. You may recall that the Aiken Standard submitted a, back when the superintendent thing happened,
Yeah.
they submitted a FOIA, and it was very expensive. There's Michael Smith, who had worked there, also did one when he was writing for the Aiken Observer. If you go back, look up Aiken Observer. He was doing some good writing after he got done with the Aiken Standard, but, you know, when you're working another job, it's hard to
Forgot about him.
do a lot. But he filed when they tried to charge him like $15,000, so he couldn't do it. My third FOIA with the city, they tried charging me $5,000. I said, okay, I get the hint. So I narrowed the scope. It's nothing you can do. You narrow the scope. If it's saying it's going to take us this long, it's going to charge you this much, say, I only want this period of time. You know, and you say, and then they say it's kind of like the Freedom of Information Act request you got from one of the AMDC commissioners who also happens to be president of the Chamber of Commerce and was using his Chamber of Commerce account to conduct city business. And they didn't know how to download it onto file, so they had to print it all. I had to pay for all those papers, 218 pages. I said, sure. And I bid on that one, and I'm glad I did. I think they thought I was going to. It was a $192 charge, because it was 218 pages at 15 cents a page, and there was 3 hours of search, review, redaction, and still fighting them on that because I found that there's a 2-week period where there's no emails on a particular subject that's very important pertaining to the purchase and sale, and it clearly got withheld. And I said, if you withheld this, you have to tell me that you withheld it and tell me why. You didn't say you withheld anything. So that's the other thing, what I'm saying is a response. You have to say, is this response sufficient? Because the agency will try and close the response right away if they're trying to withhold stuff. Other agencies are just going to be like, yeah, here it is. We got nothing to hide.
Is there anything that could, I mean, what are you going to do about the information that is not being that is being withheld? What recourse do you have?
The only recourse you have is to go to court.
You mentioned like the power of the group. I mean, if there were a number of people saying, why aren't we getting this information? Mr. Moniak,
They can still say, under FOIA, we can't exempt this information. The entire solicitation, that one document that's online that they have in their transparency, there's a good example of transparency. On the transparency page, there's a document that shows a list of companies that bid, that submitted requests for proposals in May of 2021. Well, all the names of the companies are blocked out. Okay? It's still redacted. And they still refuse to release that information, saying it's an open, it's still related to proposed contractual arrangements, and it's still related to efforts and activities of the public body. They still refuse to release that because there's one hotel developer who said, I just want to work on the Hotel Aiken. He didn't want any part of the conference center, didn't want any part of the apartments. And it said in the document that they were very well qualified, but they didn't want any part of the big project. They don't want to build a garage. They don't want to build apartments.
So
But we don't know who that company is.
who's responsible for the selection for the RFPs? Who do we look to? Is it
That-
the city manager
Oh,
again?
there you go, because the AMDC is its own semi-independent autonomous body. They came, and city council allows them to be more independent than they should.
Now, Mrs. Jane is our past city
Yes.
council. Can she provide
But that was, the AMTC's come in
some
quite
guidance.
a bit of time after, they didn't start till 2019.
But she had a lot of experience, can she speak to it?
Dick Duar is the only person who said, who voted against
So
the
this is our
AMTC.
responsibility.
That's right.
Spending of this money is city council's responsibility.
Yep.
And that's the bottom line to all of this. If city council did not go on, if your representative did not go along with this, we wouldn't be happy.
Yeah.
That seems, makes sense to me,
That
yeah.
is it in a nutshell, isn't it?
And when is it
Yes.
for reelection?
Well, they made sure it wasn't this year.
Yeah.
Next year,
Next year, the mayor's up for reelection, and
Mayor's up.
there's two city council
Two
people,
council.
Kate Roll and Gail Diggs are both up
So
for
we need
reelection.
to get a candidate.
But to fully answer your question, the AMTC, they kind of operate on their own, and they had a resolution that says that the chairman of the AMTC and the executive director, who's the economic development director, are the two people who are supposed to negotiate with developers and also negotiate on purchase and sale. So two people. And if you read what I just wrote about the Gary Smith defense that came out in response to the lawsuit, I think the biggest part of that defense is not what he's admitting and denying. I think the biggest part is what he wasn't doing. There was no oversight. There were no lawyers present to make sure that they weren't. There's not a single lawyer mentioned in most of their meetings, and yet they're going into executive session month after month after month without any legal advice going on. So, you know, there's conflict of interest, and then there's dereliction of duty. And a lot of people like to talk about RICO and all this and that. Well, you know, talk about competency in abandoning your responsibilities first before you start talking about. To me, betrayal of public trust through undermining of the laws is far worse than some schmuck taking a bribe from a developer. That's my opinion, but they're both bad. But one's systemic and one may not be.
So if the AMTC has members that don't meet the requirements, could one not question any decisions made by the AMTC?
That's exactly what the lawsuit does. The
Yeah.
July 5th lawsuit, Blake versus City,
Right.
Blake et al. Versus City of Aiken et al.
They should, all their decisions should be.
It says that in several places, the design review board had two people, and that's a real issue. Who lives in the county and doesn't live in the city here? Well, okay, now you have no voice, yet there's 5 people who, in the same position as you, who are sitting on a board making $10 million decisions for the city, and they don't live in the city.
Yeah.
That's really astonishing, isn't it?
That's never been happened before.
Never?
This mayor is responsible.
Yeah.
Mm.
I agree to that. He's the presiding officer. He's the presiding officer of all these meetings, right? He is the mayor.
Well, the other thing that he does that just drives me crazy is when you have a public hearing. It's a public hearing, it's not a hearing before the almighty mayor.
Yeah.
And he forces people to put their backside to the audience. They used to always stand so they could address the whole group.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
Oh, this is
O'Brien
new?
is- Where Mr. O'Brien stands now.
Oh.
And
So that's on tape, isn't it?
Yes,
Is it
I
old?
got to know Lisa.
And they would stand, and then at that one meeting, he directed an individual to not look around but address him only directly, which is unheard of.
Hmm.
Never
Is he the
happened.
one who called the police to bring that one person outside?
They didn't take anybody outside. Is that the design review board meeting? Oh, no, that's all. That didn't even happen. I've been fighting the Aiken standing on that for,
Well, we were on the other
2
room,
months
in the
now.
overflow room.
yeah.
We were just following.
I'll tell you what happened.
Yeah.
There was a discussion going on in the room. I was right there next to it because I got there early enough. There was a discussion. There were people objecting to the fact that public comment wasn't being taken. It wasn't anything serious. It wasn't like people were pointing fingers and being angry. And Tim O'Brien walked out and got a cop.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
meant.
he came in and tried
That's what I
to
meant.
break it up, or, tried to settle things down.
Yeah,
But I'll tell you, I didn't sit down because a cop came in the room. That's when I started talking myself, and I don't remember what I said. I had to watch myself on video a month later because I was like, I was so angry at what was going on,
Well, I couldn't,
that it was just unbelievable what was going on.
I didn't know why we were being ushered
But
out.
Jim Hawley, the lawyer, did come, he said, I will look into this issue of the fact that those meetings are being described as public, and yet people weren't able to, you know, I said, they're just calling these public meetings, they're saying these meetings are for public input, the AMDC is saying that, why are you treating it any differently than what they're saying you are? You've got to be consistent, you all are the city. Everybody, it's all the city. The city is the AMDC, the AMDC is the city, the DRB is the city, right? Does that
Yeah, that was.
make sense? Yeah, so that whole story was wrong. I tried to get the Aiken Standard to turn a correction, they haven't. Go ahead.
Don, I was gonna ask you about that one. When WTC withdrew, I guess they had 135,000 in earnest monies, and somehow the other corporation, which wasn't even formed at that time, how did they end up getting their money back? I'm still
Well,
trying
WTC reincorporated on May 9th, 2021, and then on May 12th, they closed the deal.
Okay,
That's how.
but I mean, they're related, so.
They were
I
going to do it
guess-
on May 8th. And I'm pretty sure on May 8th, somebody had to say, you guys aren't incorporated, we can't finish this.
But I
Just
guess
like I opened a
that's-
checking account yesterday. It was a business account for my new company called Eureka Research. And they wanted to see my articles of organization. And she wasn't going to give me that account unless I showed it to her.
Wow.
Well, a $9.5 million deal, I would suspect the lawyer who was in the closing said, where's your, and WTC wasn't incorporated, isn't that funny? In a way. You gotta laugh at some of this stuff. So then, and then the 135,000, Chamber of Commerce compensated WTC with their money. Chamber of Commerce held it and paid the earnest money, and then the AMDC compensated the Chamber of Commerce with a $135 check, $135,000 check.
Well, isn't that nice of them to give our money back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and,
Isn't it nice to bail out people who,
yeah.
who stiff you?
Yeah.
And are we not up for a $63,000 interest payment?
That's what I've heard, yeah. I haven't followed the bond thing very well, to tell you the truth. I really haven't, other than how it happened. Because otherwise, you can really get lost in legalese and financials in a big hurry. And it's hard to translate, too. You see how hard it is to translate the lawsuit stuff, and how hard the Aiken Standard has. Because they got very confusing this week, saying that you made it sound like the whole lawsuit was dismissed. But there's a motion to dismiss the whole lawsuit. There's a motion to dismiss the players, the city council. And what I've learned is that, because I didn't really look at it that closely the first time, is the city council's lawyers are arguing that it's a tort case, which is a damage case, but it's not a tort case. They're not asking for damages. The word tort is missing from the lawsuit. But they're coming back with a tort argument. So just to say that, just because they make an argument doesn't make that argument right. But often people who don't have legal training, and I don't have much at all, I've only operated on a pro se basis a few times. And it's bone-wearing stuff, going up against lawyers who can twist you around like a string. A lot of times people are just deferential to experts and authority, they don't ask questions. You got a question back there?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you and everybody else who works on the Aiken experience. The other thing is that Aiken Standard, when I first started reading the coverage of this project, they sounded like cheerleaders. I mean, they were, the organ of the Chamber of Commerce, powers that be. It's gotten a little clearer, I think, the coverage. I haven't been consistent in it, but I do subscribe and try to pay attention to what they're doing. But
they need to know what is known by you all and us about what's what, I mean,
I've been,
this is a lot of investigative reporting that's been done, and I think if the public knew more about what you all have uncovered, and, well, Post and Courier owns the Aiken Standard.
That's right.
They do excellent investigative.
they can, so can the Aiken Standard, if you read that May 22nd investigative report on how the sheriff's department had a couple of deputies who were pulling over the
Yeah.
buses at 1 in the morning out at exit 33 on their way out of the county, roasting all the people out of their sleep and searching their bags without cause. And not only that, they were caught making up their justification for pulling over. Think about it. Who's ridden a bus? Greyhound bus in your life? Aren't those, you're professional drivers, right?
Yes.
Do you ever worry about them? You gotta worry about it, but they don't go veering across the road all the time, right? And if you get a bus driver who's crossing the center line on a routine basis, then you should be notifying the company of that, right? Because they shouldn't be on the road. They're claiming that professional bus drivers are routinely crossing the center line. And I just don't buy that at all. That's fabricating.
They were fishing for
Cause.
drugs in that,
That's
Yeah.
right. They were fishing.
and they
But
stereotyped.
to answer the question about the Aiken Standard is that they get all this information. You're a subscriber?
Yeah.
Just write a letter and say, I'm a subscriber. I'm a subscriber, I expect better. That's what you can do. That's what I do. I say, I'm a subscriber. As a digital
And they
subscriber,
certainly-
I disagree with what you said. And then the second part of that is that you're correct at the beginning of all this. On November 4th of 2021, Colin Damaris had in his possession all the documents that they were going to release 4 days later. He got it early. And he wrote about some of it. He wrote about the Chamber of Commerce involvement. It's just a little 2-line paragraph, 2-sentence paragraph, but it's in there. And then on November 7th or 8th, right after that, in the Sunday paper, there was an editorial that came out all in support of the project. And since that, there's never been anything written about the Chamber of Commerce involvement and all that. And they also stopped writing about, you notice how they only talk about the Hotel Aiken, right? They're going to demolish the Hotel Aiken. Well, they're also going to demolish Warnocky Cleaners. Why can't you say that? We are going to demolish Warnocky Cleaners. And say it clearly. And if people accept that, then they accept it. Sure, let's demolish Warnocky Cleaners. Let's go out to Newberry Hall and give me a shot put on a swing, and we'll start banging on that wall and help them along. You know, why can't they say that? Why can't they say we're going to demolish Newberry Hall? Have you ever seen the paper say that? Once?
They're serving the
They
interest
only
of the
say they're going to demolish
developers.
the hotel. And they don't even like to talk about the C.C. Johnson building much either. They don't say we're going to demolish C.C. Johnson building. They say we're going to demolish buildings next to the hotel.
Right. Mr. McGee.
That's a conscious choice. So you can tell, you say you're making a conscious choice on what to report and what words to use. And I want to see you report on, that's your choice.
And don't you think they've certainly read your work in the
I've
Aiken
been sending you
Chronicles? I
since
mean,
May.
it's not a mystery to them.
Aiken Chronicles.
That's why I think everybody should advertise the Aiken Chronicle, you know, to get information about what's going on with your researchers in
But
there.
you should also
Yeah,
read
everybody, we should
the
put
Aiken
it more on
Standard. Aiken
Facebook.
Standard's the paper of record though, right? In this county, they receive a lot of money
Yeah.
for notices, for public notices, ads from the city. You know the ad for the April 20th meetings, that full-page ad for that? Aiken Standard receives something like 1,400. It's online, it's on that, it's in that file that they finally put back up, called the AMDC Financial, financial something, I'm losing. But it's a 218-page file that the Aiken Standard got like $1,200 for those full-page ads.
Just to mention, Don is funding all of the research himself, and we're all benefiting from it, so there's a hand back there on the table, if anybody'd like to chip in a little bit for the freedom of information.
There are ways to contribute through the Aiken Chronicles. All we're looking to do is try to try to,
Yeah, we had
Cover
done, put a
costs.
car wash, fix it,
But you can donate online.
yes.
You can donate online
Donate
as well.
online, you
That's
can send
easy
it-
to do.
You can send a check to my new P.O. box in Vaucluse. Vaucluse, 29850,
I think today
Got a
there
P.O.
were
box there now.
100 of
oldest operating post office in South Carolina, right on that nice pond that they don't let anybody use anymore. They're letting people fish on the banks now.
Now,
Yeah.
Don, what can you recommend for the community, absent of another lawsuit, which I'm not into the lawsuit ideas, you know? There's got, you have a background in
You know,
advocacy.
the thing is, I recommend is try to pay attention, try to look at city council agendas every week before they come out and see if there's anything that
But should we write letters to the city council? Should we?
I would be,
We
even
should
if they're.
start putting that on the do it rate page then. The city
Yeah.
would council
Get your
agenda.
neighbors to sign the petition.
But why was there able to, why was there able to, why were they able to pass $9.5 million bond issuance? And only one
I want to know
person,
where the bonds are. I mean,
one person showed up to talk
Are
about
they-
it, they were kind of skeptical, but they're.
And who's making the payments, the interest payments? I mean, they're draining city coffers.
Yeah.
We
They
are.
have to be making interest payments.
Well, there you go, that too, there's a $25 million in, what's that? Excuse me?
I suspect the bonds are authorized, but not actually issued.
Oh, really? Okay, I don't know what this is.
Because the real estate hasn't closed.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That they're authorized, but they haven't been like sold in the secondary market.
There's also the plutonium settlement money.
But they haven't been sold yet.
I don't think so.
That's why they were issued against was the patrol,
They're, yeah, now they've been,
it's kind of.
$25 million, this is really important, $25 million have been allocated from plutonium settlement money to, quote, downtown and north side redevelopment. And I asked Tom Young about this, because he was very involved with this. I said, does this mean it's not allocated to a specific project? And he said, yes, it's not. It's not allocated. So, you know, it's really up to the community, because it's a city of Aiken, this is a city of Aiken gift, or as you call it. I have very
It was given to the
involved
city of
feelings on that
Aiken
plutonium
because of the
settlement,
risk
but the
and
fact is
everything
it's
else
there,
they
they
take.
got it.
Right up.
It's up to the people in the city of Aiken to decide how that money should be spent.
But isn't it now available to the AMDC?
They have to vote for it. They have to vote for it the same way any other budget item. They can't just give it to them. It has to go through a hearing process like any budget item. Isn't that correct? It's not allocated to them. No, it's open. It's open for, and you know, the one thing you can do is what I suggest is organize a meeting. And I wanted to do this, but frankly, I just, you know, I actually asked Shane Massey and Tom Young to moderate a meeting for the community, either at the municipal building or at Aiken High would be a good place. Have a meeting, say, what do you think this money should be spent on? What are the needs in this community? And sure, Pascalis might be one option, but otherwise they're gonna get $20 million, and you know what? It's just like all them guys sitting down at Prime Steakhouse eating their steaks and drinking their whiskey. They get the steak and the whiskey, and the north side gets the bones, if there's a bone on that steak.
But hasn't the city accepted the ACOM plan, strategic plan, as to how they're going to prioritize?
That's a strategic plan, but it's not a legal redevelopment plan. It's only a guidance document. Every city is required to have these 5-year guidance documents.
But the city has agreed that they're going to follow that.
Yeah, but it's not binding at all. Yeah, the AECOM plan, it's just a guidance plan. There's nothing, for the redevelopment, and this is interesting, because in June, before the lawsuit was filed, according to Pope and Flynn's invoices, their invoice reads, it's almost like a narrative. It's great. Their invoice reads that they were working on a new redevelopment plan in June, behind closed doors, of course. But they're working on a new redevelopment plan. There's another quote saying that they spent an hour on trying to pivot. They're trying to pivot the project. What all this means, I don't know. They're working on what's called an omnibus ordinance. don't know what that means, I asked them today. They were working on all these things in June to try to change the project in ways that we don't know yet. So it's really different, but there's the AECOM plan, then there was a plan that was passed in 2020 that didn't involve any demolition. It involved the new city hall and everything along Richland and the hotel, but it wasn't involved. That's the legal plan, but Pascalis doesn't resemble that at all, not even close. And so the AECOM plan is not legally valid under South Carolina Community Development Law, because South Carolina Community Development Law requires a plan that addresses 10 or 12 different things, and one of those things is anybody going to be dislocated? Are any families going to be dislocated? And in their plan, it says none.
Families and businesses, or just families?
It says families, but if you have a family business, it's a family, right? You're being dislocated.
They're dealing with Pond Village.
Oh, I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's lawyers who are going to be out there parsing that and saying, well, we're talking about families in their homes, not family businesses. Who cares about them? Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
How would that go over? Probably not too well. People would say, oh, that's why people hate lawyers sometimes.
I'd like an investigation into Han Village, what was done with that. I'm gonna, if anybody wants, say, these are just flyers for the Aiken Chronicles, if you want to share it with anybody, so they can know the address. Only a couple of ones left have a little QR code, you can point your phone at it and it'll take you to it. You got, good, okay. So just be sure if you know of anybody that could benefit from that or anything.
Well, I would also love to know everybody's name. I just moved to Aiken in February. So
I would too.
I'm throwing myself in, but I don't know any of you, and I know we're all talking online and trying to.
You share with Lisa, because this is a group that you all organized.
So,
And I really appreciate your time, and I hope some of that made sense. I haven't done this in a long time. It's been 20 years since I've spoken for a group. And, it's just, I'm a little rusty.
you did a great job.
Yes.
Very important.